It takes over 10 seconds of loading just to get to the title screen. Unlike previous games, it's not explained how Amateur Sleuth and Master Sleuth modes are different from each other. The game's tutorial fails to explain you can skip cutscenes and dialogue. Nancy goes on vacation and accidentally uncovers a mystery cliché. It's hard to read the subtitles in the opening scene because they disappear whenever the screen fades to black. These tree leaves. Multiple times, the text box has a comma where there should be a period. This screen fades in from black for one frame, then fades in from black a second time.
Feels like ages since I was on my last adventure.
It was 4.5 years between this game and the previous one, and I am still bitter about it. The first minute of the game is Nancy looking around a dark room.
The desk is locked, and I don't...
The subtitles aren't synced with the dialogue. Many times throughout the game, there is a text box that is just one word. The window to the room is closed, but it was opened 20 seconds ago during the opening scenes.
That's where I am right now, actually. Hot on the trail of the Book of Apologies, in the castle archive.
Nancy isn't in the castle archive. The text box is inconsistent about whether or not Dad is capitalized.
Oh, no.
The text box displays an incorrect number of no's.
I've never actually been in that room.
How does Dr. Hearst know what's in the room if she's never been inside?
Ghosts exist in this castle, and if they do exist...
Dr. Hearst says ghosts exist, then immediately says if they exist. Do they exist or not, Dr. Hearst? Dr. Hearst builds suspense for a ghost sighting that never occurs.
Ghost? Can't say I've ever seen one.
Nancy forgets about the ghosts in Message in a Haunted Mansion, Ghost Dogs of Moon Lake, Secret of Shadow Ranch, Haunting of Castle Malloy, Shadow at the Water's Edge, and Ghost of Thornton Hall. Besides for the Book of Apologies, absolutely nothing in this room is relevant to the rest of the game.
There really isn't much here.
Yes, Judge Sewell was a Puritan.
That feels like an excuse to justify starting the game in an empty room.
Some of this stuff looks very old.
How can you tell? It's behind a sheet. Dr. Hearst hides behind a door to save on animation.
It's the book written by Judge Samuel Sewell himself, detailing the names of people accused of witchcraft. It was a ledger containing all the names of the accused witches from the Salem witch trials.
Dr. Hearst explains what the Book of Apologies is twice.
An old chest. But it won't open.
The game teases us with a locked chest which is never opened.
He wrote the book as a means to make amends.
Allegedly.
Allegedly? Why is Nancy casting doubt on Judge Sewell's motives? Many times in the game, the text box has opening quotation marks that aren't followed by closing quotation marks. Why is the left-hand side of the maze blocked off? How does Nancy know this is the Book of Apologies? The book isn't labeled. This lock is incredibly shallow. The AW key is far too large to completely fit into it.
It says AW. Any ideas?
Nancy forgets she just read a letter to a woman with the initials AW.
But I have some tools in the shop that might be able to cut it free. In my shop.
Dr. Hearst clarifies that the tools in the shop are in the shop.
Wait for me.
Nancy says this, then proceeds to stand in place. Did you want to look at the scenery here? Too bad! It's blurry the whole time. Nancy answers a long-distance phone call, even though she's too busy to talk right now, and she doesn't like the person who's calling. The shadow on the wall shows the Book of Apologies floating in midair. What happened to the cage that was holding the Book of Apologies? Jason jumped from this window to the ground without hurting himself. How did Jason enter this window from the outside without a ladder?
Stop! Stop running!
Does Nancy seriously think the culprit will stop running because she asked him to? Jason crawls away from the crime scene in order to give Nancy enough time to catch up to him. Nancy jumps off a bridge without first checking to see how far down the jump is. She's lucky she's not dead right now. The ground is fairly close to the bridge here, but Nancy runs forward and jumps off at a place where the ground is farther away. Jason stands in place and does nothing, so Nancy can catch up to him. Jason is standing upright, but when the cutscene starts, he's hunched over. What is Jason doing here? He appears to be looking at something in his hands, but when he turns, his hands are empty. Jason's hands are empty, and I don't see any pockets in his clothes. Where did the Book of Apologies go? Nancy's phone buzzes, but the screen is blank. Every other time her phone buzzes in this game, the screen shows who's calling. We never find out who called Nancy here.
Come on.
Jason waits for Nancy's phone to finish buzzing before he reacts to it. Nancy doesn't try chasing Jason a second time. The ground is empty during this scene. The evidence on the ground magically appears once the scene is over. Nancy knows the culprit's flight number, seat number, and departure time. She could easily use this information to identify the culprit, but she doesn't. The two plane tickets are slightly different sizes. One plane ticket has a perforated edge, and the other does not.
You know where I am right now? Salem.
That's a weird way to start a conversation.
Salem? As in, witch trial Salem?
Obvi.
There are 27 Salems in the United States, making it the 5th most common name for a city. So, no, Deirdre, it's not obvi where you're calling from. Nancy accepts the case from Deirdre without any questions. Even though last time Deirdre got Nancy a case, Nancy was almost killed multiple times. Why is Nancy wearing May's sweater? Deirdre's giant neck. Deirdre repeats the same 3 animations over and over again. These opening scenes go on forever. Why don't the characters in this game ever stop talking? You can easily get to Hathorne House from the sidewalk. Why doesn't Nancy ever approach it from this direction? If you pause at the start of this scene, you see the lawn is clear. The next second, rocks, leaves, and shadows magically pop into existence. The red wall on the right disappears. This bush should be visible in the far-off shot, but it's not. This opening shot of Hathorne House doesn't match the house as it appears in the game. The trees, bushes, and grass are all different. The wall of rock to the left of the house is turned into a hedge. Lauren's house changes colors from brown to green. The gray pathway leading to the doorway is replaced with a series of rocks leading to the door. Large plants are added to the right of the doorway. Deirdre drives past the Hathorne house, but she does not drive past the cemetery and town square, which are right next to the Hathorne house. Deirdre drives without turning the steering wheel. Deirdre is driving a manual car, but she never switches gears. There are multiple cars on this road, which are all driven by the exact same person.
But the person who lived there had to move out.
Wrong. Lauren never lived in Hathorne House. She lived in the carriage house.
You take my lead, okay?
Deirdre insists on being in charge, then proceeds to follow Nancy the entire game.
And in my experience, we can cover twice as much ground if we work side by side.
Wrong. You cover twice as much ground if you split up.
I don't want you messing it up by being too you. You're a question machine.
Deirdre expects Nancy to solve the mystery without questioning any suspects.
This requires gentle handling. Delicate.
Deirdre forgets this on day 3 of the game, when she starts hurling wild accusations at Lauren. Deirdre's right pant leg goes over her coat. Deirdre's pants are tucked into her shoes. Deirdre does a terrible job of summarizing the case.
The Hathorne house is haunted.
Nancy waits 20 seconds before responding. Deirdre parks her car facing the wrong direction. Deirdre's butt. There is a 12-second cutscene of Nancy and Deirdre walking to a door. Tegan Perry. All the characters in this game constantly sway left and right, like they don't know how to stand up. Tegan and many other characters constantly hold their arms at a weird angle. Tegan turns her head and stares at nothing while the camera resets itself. This sentence doesn't have a period at the end. Tegan's fingers go through each other.
How are you, Deirdre?
The characters' mouths keep moving after they finish talking.
You live in the same neighborhood for 20 years and...
The Perrys have lived here for over 300 years.
Hungry? There's clam chowder, homemade.
I could get you more chowder.
The characters talk about clam chowder, but we never see any.
Deirdre, sorry, you're bunking with May.
Why can't Deirdre sleep in the parents' bedroom?
That was 2 questions. I said 1.
Tegan wants Nancy to solve the case, but she refuses to answer any questions, and she refuses to let Nancy talk to May. How does she expect Nancy to solve the case? Deirdre knows the answers that Tegan is unwilling to give. Why doesn't she tell Nancy? Tegan cares more about Nancy visiting the museum than about Nancy solving the case.
I have time for 1 question, if it'll help. Look, I appreciate you want help, but I don't want you dragging all that up and upsetting May.
Tegan says she wants to help, but immediately refuses to help.
Is there some other fire I need to know about?
Yes, and it makes no sense for the characters to keep this information a secret from Nancy. How does Tegan get to work? She doesn't have a car.
Nice to meet you.
May is a jerk. Why are we helping her again? A white square flashes in the lower left corner during this cutscene.
I'll be in the kitchen.
Deirdre says this to someone who's standing in the kitchen.
Are you ready to leave yet? We don't have all day.
Deirdre sits down, then complains that they aren't leaving. Deirdre stands through the table.
Tegan said you've been in town for days, but you haven't come by.
Where was Deirdre staying the last few days?
What were you actually doing before you picked me up from the airport?
Deirdre has been in town for several days, but she only explains what she did earlier this morning. What did she do yesterday or the day before that?
I went to the police station.
This is a useful thing that Nancy doesn't do.
And they're still going through the evidence.
The police are going through the evidence against May, but for the rest of the game, we're assured there is no evidence against her.
There was some weirdo there who told me the ghost was...
Deirdre takes advice from random weirdos. Everyone in the game acts like Judge Danforth is the one who decides who gets arrested, which is not true. The police decide who to arrest, not the local judge.
Means, motive, and opportunity. See if anyone checks off those 3 boxes.
Nancy doesn't investigate this angle.
In your experience?
It's usually something much more personal.
Both Deirdre and Nancy act like they don't remember the arson case in Alibi in Ashes. The clocks in this game are all stuck at 10:13. Sometimes the game glitches and leaves fall when Nancy is inside. Nancy can never enter May's room. Nancy can't ask May about anything useful or relevant.
Found it.
Low-effort Easter egg. We never learn who wrote this note or why.
Thanks for finally picking up.
Ned complains about Nancy not picking up her phone when he never picks up his phone. Where is Ned? Why did Nancy and Ned go on separate vacations at the same time?
Sorry, I've been on a flight.
Busy on another case, huh?
Ned knows Nancy was in Austria. Why does Ned assume she was flying to a new case instead of assuming she's flying back home?
I'll call you later.
Call you later, Nancy.
We never learn who this woman is, or why she has Ned's phone. Who is she? Deirdre is freakishly giant on the porch. Every time Nancy turns around, Deirdre is standing there staring at her. It's creepy. Nancy doesn't question the fact that a lighter is found at a suspected arsonist's house. When Nancy first enters the town, this person appears from out of nowhere. The leaves at the bottom change, and the tree behind Olivia gets twice as many leaves. Nancy rudely forces herself in between these 2 people when there is plenty of empty space for her to stand. Olivia spends the first day of the game looking at a bale of hay, instead of at the audience she's performing for. Everyone stands around and does nothing long after Olivia's show is over.
So cool.
Nancy and this random guy react to Olivia's magic trick before she does it. It's never explained how Jason learned Olivia's smoke bomb trick. When Jason does the smoke bomb trick, he leaves behind an empty can. When Olivia does the trick, there's no can.
The truth is, witches use the same kind of stage magic.
The audience members repeat themselves. You can talk to this woman by clicking on a tree. When you talk to the woman, the game zooms in on this man. The game reuses the same background characters multiple times. Clicking on Olivia from this angle starts a conversation with the random woman. When the background characters talk, they don't look at each other or move their mouths. The text messages are boring. The text messages are very slow. This glitch.
The judge's office is in that building.
Deirdre's directions are useless. This counts as a closed-off area that Nancy can't get to.
Hi, you've reached the phone of Private Investigator Deirdre Shannon.
If you call someone while looking at them, their mouths move. Why isn't Tegan involved with the massive protest that her AW group is putting on? Judge Danforth couldn't have locked himself in his office because the lock is on the outside of the door. Judge Danforth is so stupid, he locked himself in his office. Why do people trust him with important legal decisions?
You'd really become my enemy if I committed a crime?
Deirdre and Nancy are already enemies.
And I'm with my friend Deirdre Shannon. We're investigating the arson of the Hathorne house. Judge, this is Deirdre Shannon. She's working with me on the case.
Nancy introduces Deirdre to Judge Danforth twice.
Yes, and I'm sure we can read all about the home's history in Salem's museum.
We can't read about Hathorne House anywhere in the museum.
A few months ago, Frances Tuttle passed away, which left Hathorne House without a legal heir.
Why is Frances Tuttle's adopted daughter, who lived with her for over a decade, not considered an heir?
The investigation found paint solvent residue on burnt embers, suggesting someone deliberately used an accelerant.
Nobody investigates this angle, even though Nancy has experience with identifying accelerants.
And there's only one person in all of Salem who has a history of fire-related crime.
Nancy doesn't react to this statement. You would expect her to show some surprise to learn May committed arson before. Nancy has trouble distinguishing between Judge Danforth's opinions and the objective fact that May is the police's prime suspect.
When she is the only likely suspect.
She isn't the only likely suspect. Many other people have motives. The quotation marks around luminous infusions appear in separate text boxes. How did the protesters find out about the theft from the evidence room? Why is a protester wandering around here, far from the others? Is he lost? This low-effort museum has 0 displays that Nancy can look at. Seniors and museum members pay the same ticket price. Why would any senior citizen ever become a member? You can call Tegan from inside the museum.
Hey, sorry about the mess.
What mess? This place is empty.
Don't get suckered into that witch's walking tour. Olivia Ravencroft is not a witch.
We decided to do the Real Witches tour.
Oh, you talked to Olivia.
Tegan first tells Nancy about Olivia's tour at the Perry house. When Nancy mentions the tour later, Tegan assumes she heard about it from Olivia.
How's the investigating going? Any progress with May?
No, because you have forbidden Nancy from talking to May.
I've got some leads.
What are they, and why isn't Nancy following up on her leads, instead of going on a sightseeing tour?
If you come back on Halloween, I'll show you.
Tegan doesn't show you the showcase when you visit the museum on Halloween.
I found this letter at your house.
Were you digging through our trash?
Tegan knows where the letter was found without being told.
What can I say? I love a good puzzle.
Then you'd probably hate this game, which has only one puzzle in the first hour.
Can you keep your assistant out of my garbage?
Tegan says this right in front of Nancy. Tegan is a jerk.
The Accused Witches organization. Do you know anything about them?
Tegan fails to mention that she personally runs Accused Witches.
How did you perform that trick?
A witch never reveals her secrets.
Nancy should explain she needs to know this information as part of a criminal investigation. Nancy doesn't remember she learned about flash explosions in the final scene. Olivia puts all her effort into advertising her free walking tour instead of advertising her paid nighttime tours. Olivia is terrible at business.
If you take my self-guided tour, I promise you will learn at least one secret about being a witch.
That's not part of the tour.
There's a ghost here. If you go on my tour, you'll learn where you can find it.
That's not part of the tour.
Also, did you know that Salem has more ghost sightings than any other city in North America? If you want to learn why, you should go on my tour.
That's also not part of the tour. Olivia does false advertising.
Is there any evidence of such a coven?
Nancy forgets she has a picture with the word coven written on it.
Ever since then, ghost sightings have gone through the roof.
That is evidence that ghosts exist, not evidence that a coven exists.
How often do you do this show?
Most nights.
Olivia says she does her show at night when she does her show during the day.
It gets busier around Halloween.
Olivia says she does her show more often around Halloween, but it's Halloween time and she only does it once. The game is inconsistent about whether it's one ghost or many ghosts in Salem. Where did the tour tablet come from? Nancy doesn't give the tablet back to Olivia when the tour is done. Nancy can look through this tourist. Nancy refuses to explore the Hathorne house until the second day of the game. Why doesn't she want to examine the crime scene right away?
Not yet. There are some more things I'd like to look into before I'm done.
Nancy says she has other things to do before exploring Hathorne house, even after you finish everything on her task list.
Stands Abigail Hathorne.
The game is inconsistent as to whether her name is Abigail Hathorne or Abigail Hathorne Woodley.
Locked her up in a cell deep within the Hathorne house.
Nancy knows there is a secret room in Hathorne house, but she never looks for it. These candles burn for 3 days straight, and yet they never get any smaller.
Okay, I'm officially exhausted.
Deirdre complains she's worn out from investigating, even though she barely did anything. It's 10:13, and Lauren's shop is already closed for the day. Those are terrible operating hours. The Raven in this window is not part of the Raven tour. There are tons of tourists in town for Halloween, yet all the stores are closed. Nancy and Deirdre relax in the car for a few minutes and listen to music together. This is super out of character for both of them. It sure is convenient Nancy has a forced conversation about May's favorite band a minute before she has to talk to May about her favorite band. The camera repositions itself in between Deirdre's sentences. 2 songs play at the same time during this scene. This text box glitch.
Always listening to music.
May listens to music once. Text box messes up its and its. Multiple times the game uses all right instead of all right. May's right arm teleports multiple times. May's phone screen is blank. It is clearly not turned on right now.
She cared enough to get Deirdre and I involved.
It's Deirdre and me, not Deirdre and I.
See you tonight.
Tegan says see you tonight when it's already nighttime. What does Tegan do during the first night? She's not at home. Where is she? We hear the cemetery door open, even though the door itself stays shut. This cutscene starts with the camera changing locations. Olivia's items in the woods aren't visible in this scene.
We read about the Hathorne house in the Globe. Tegan Perry mentioned she had hired you to investigate.
Tegan lies about hiring Nancy. Tegan is a jerk. Multiple times, Tegan tells Nancy not to upset May by drawing attention to her situation. So why does Tegan give newspaper interviews about the investigation?
What my brother is trying to say is that there are some similarities to an old case we worked on.
I am way more interested in revisiting an old Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys case than I am in solving this case.
Sure. If you want to send me your notes, I can look them over for you.
This never happens. Once again, the camera readjusts itself at the start of the cutscene. The camera readjusts itself once the cutscene ends. We never learn who turned on this light. We never learn how they got inside that room. Nancy can't get inside there. The crowbar in the bushes isn't here in this scene. Lauren's creepy laughing mouth.
I didn't mean to lie to you, Lauren.
Nancy apologizes for lying to Lauren, even if she didn't lie to her.
What were you doing 2 nights ago?
The Book of Apologies was stolen 2 days before Nancy arrives in Salem. Why did she wait a day instead of going to Salem right away? Jason's plane ticket is dated October 28th. If that was 2 days ago, it means the 3rd day of the game takes place in November, and we missed Halloween.
I was in my shop, like I was every night.
Lauren claims her shop is always open at night, but it's closed all 3 nights of the game. Multiple times the game hyphenates no one, which doesn't need a hyphen.
I have sales receipts to prove it. You come by Luminous Infusions, and I'll show you.
Lauren never shows her receipts to Nancy. Lauren serves tea in coffee mugs. We never get to explore Lauren's carriage house.
So, I saw the ghost out in the cemetery.
The scarecrow?
The scarecrow ghost isn't in the cemetery, it's in the woods past the cemetery.
Have you looked for the will?
Nancy knows the will exists without being told about it first.
According to the historical statutes of Salem, after 90 days, the house reverts to public property.
And now the judge has given me days to deliver.
Lauren is lying. She was given 90 days to find the will.
Days to deliver, or the town will take control.
The state will take control of Hathorne House, not the town. Why did Frances hide her will behind a series of puzzles? Didn't she want Lauren to find it? A rock on the path disappears as this cutscene starts. There's a white blur at the left window which never gets explained. Is it the ghost? The camera readjusts itself at the start of this conversation.
I saw it. Or her. I guess it could have been a him too. It was too confusing to really make out.
Nancy doesn't know who the ghost is, even though the text box identified her by name.
But my instinct is
that the two are related. The fire and the ghosts.
It turns out they're not related. Nancy has bad detective instincts.
I think in order to know, I need to see it again, and you need to come with me tomorrow.
This doesn't happen.
There's always an explanation. Gotta remember that.
Nancy says this after answering the phone, but the Hardy Boys don't hear it. This game has 8 questions which need question marks. The text box is inconsistent when it comes to using 2 hyphens or a dash. The torn note disappears from Nancy's inventory without any explanation. Nancy's task list tells her to help with breakfast before she learns breakfast needs to be made.
1 cup of sugar. 1 cup of sugar.
What Nancy says doesn't match with what's written on the paper. This is not how cooking works. When a recipe calls for a cup of flour, it does not mean any random cup you have lying around your house. The batter changes color when Nancy moves it to the next station. The melted butter is clearly not melted. Joe messed up on the first 2 sets of instructions, but he wrote these ones down without any mistakes. Joe is inconsistent at taking notes. The knobs for the stove burners are all off. Nancy shouldn't be able to cook on this stove. The pancakes are on the stove and the table at the same time.
These look amazing.
Frank talks about how the food looks, even though he doesn't look at it. Nobody eats Nancy's food. What was the point of cooking it then? Deirdre is half off screen for this entire conversation.
Joe and I have been talking recently about making things a bit more official.
The Hardys have worked for the government for the past 20 games. Why doesn't that count as official work? Deirdre has a degree in criminology, but the Hardys don't try to recruit her for their detective agency. Frank disappears if you move the camera down. There should not be a comma after the word thing.
And around the time of the arson, there was a burglary at the judge's office.
Wrong. The arson took place at night, and the burglary took place during the day. The evidence room was robbed, not the judge's office.
Too coincidental not to be connected.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
It turns out the timing is just a coincidence. Both Frank and Nancy have bad detective instincts.
Book of Apologies in Austria, as it contains a record of wronged families. The Book of Apologies. It details all the victims of the witch trials.
Nancy recaps what the Book of Apologies is twice in the same conversation. Checking everyone's alibis is a huge waste of time that leads nowhere, especially since Nancy only double-checks one alibi. Nancy checks alibis for the theft of the Book of Apologies, but not for the theft at the courthouse. The text box is inconsistent about whether or not the word which appears after an ellipsis is capitalized.
Obvious. I've got a burn mark covering the entire side of my face and like most of my arms.
That's not at all obvious because your face and arms are completely covered. The game waits 2 hours before revealing that May is a burn victim, even though it's relevant plot information that should have come up immediately.
The kitchen table has a great view out into the neighborhood.
Nancy can examine the kitchen table even when it's not visible. When Nancy calls the Hardys, they claim to be in the cemetery, even though they're clearly not there.
Aside from the weird looks from the woman who lives here,
the text box leaves out the word "the" in Joe's sentence. Lauren is working in her shop this day. How can she be giving the Hardy boys weird looks?
I got you.
The text box has an incorrect number of haws.
The judge said there was a will.
No, he didn't. The word witches shouldn't have a comma after it. The menu on the wall doesn't match with the food that's on display. The text box is inconsistent about whether or not coven is capitalized. The text box is inconsistent about whether or not coven has quotation marks around it.
More specific than anyone else I've talked to.
Nancy has not talked to anyone else about this topic.
By the time I got home, it was almost all gone.
Most of the Hathorne house is still standing.
You remember where you were 3 nights back?
I was here. I told you already.
Nancy forgets she already got Lauren's alibi last night. Lauren's tea shop contains no sinks or faucets, even though there must be a faucet here, because if she was using her faucet at home, all of her customers would hallucinate.
Kind that helps people ease their burdens. Since cold season started.
Lauren says all this without looking at Nancy. Nancy does everyone else's chores cliché. The sign says the gift shop sells magazines, yet none are available for sale.
I've heard ghosts are haunting Salem.
Nancy says this to Olivia, like someone other than Olivia told her this rumor.
It had the name Coven on it, look. Was it the one you talk about in your show?
Well, yes. Same coven.
Olivia pretends there is a real witch's coven, even after confessing it's made up. The text box has an incorrect number of haws. The phone numbers on these flyers contain too many digits. This exhibit closed in January, 9 months ago. Why does Tegan still advertise it? Nightly ghost tour. This tour happens 2 days a week. If Tegan hates Olivia's tours, why does she advertise them? The newspaper on the last day of the game is dated Friday, meaning Olivia should have done her Wednesday tour on the first night Nancy was here. She didn't. The flyer says you get tickets at the town square when you get tickets at the museum, not the town square. The tablet tour runs daily. Why isn't Olivia outside daily?
She hasn't given her alibi yet.
No, and everyone seems to have one, except her.
And Lauren, and Olivia, and Tegan. It is impossible to read the text box with the shadows turned off.
It was probably
The text box doesn't have the word I.
Books and candles are everywhere in Salem. It could be anywhere.
The text box doesn't have the word it.
Did the exhibitions manage to spark your interest?
What exhibitions?
Usually we don't allow people up on the second floor.
Why not? How did Tegan open this door without moving? These papers overlap each other. How is Nancy able to read them? Nancy learns the Parises changed their name to Perry. When Tegan tells her about it later, Nancy acts like she doesn't already know. Tegan's arms glitch. Tegan says May was charged for burning the shed, while the newspaper says May was too young to be charged. In real life, May never would have been convicted because Massachusetts law states a minor below the age of 12 can't be convicted of a crime without evidence.
Some people believe that ergot, which...
The game is inconsistent about how to pronounce the word ergot. The game awkwardly forces a conversation about ergot hallucinations where it doesn't belong. It was good to introduce players to the idea of ergot hallucinations, but Tegan's alibi is not the right place to do it.
Private investigator currently working the Hathorne House case on behalf of Judge Danforth.
Nancy isn't working on the case for the judge.
Tegan Perry.
Yes?
Your girlfriend.
Right.
Does Damien not know who his girlfriend is? These herbs aren't in Lauren's store.
Hey, what are you doing? That's private.
The text box calls this a relieved breath. Lauren teleports to the left.
Miss Drew, please, come in.
She's been inside your office for a minute now.
Jason, come on, we have a meeting.
We don't.
There is something else I need your help with. Someone broke into the evidence room.
As you know, I want to investigate the crime scene.
I'm afraid I can't just take your word for it. I'll have it taken care of.
On the first day, Judge Danforth wants Nancy to investigate the break-in. On the second day, he doesn't.
And now we have arson and break-ins.
The text box doesn't have the word "and." Why does Alicia stay in Salem if she hates everyone here?
So it's safe to say you weren't here during the theft?
I was not here. I was running errands around town.
The CCTV cameras show Alicia was here during the break-in.
That's a bit of a confidentiality issue. But you are the daughter of a lawyer, so...
That's not how confidentiality works. Most of the stuff Alicia tells Nancy here is illegal. A lot of stuff Judge Danforth tells Nancy is also illegal.
And this really isn't supposed to be in your hands. If someone finds you with it, I might have to say you stole it.
Alicia casually promises to frame Nancy for a crime. Nancy doesn't think twice about this.
Hey, next time, please knock before entering, okay?
Alicia makes a big deal out of knocking on her door, even though the door is always open. The game reuses the same inventory icon for the Hathorne House key and Lauren's lockbox key. Nancy can take Lauren's lockbox key without giving it back to her. Lauren will never be able to open the lockbox now. This conversation about Bitcoin is hilarious, but it is also completely random and serves no point. Judge Danforth's desk is not visible from this angle, but Nancy can still interact with it. When Nancy zooms in on this desk, she does not go through the door.
You just entered my room through the wall. I want an explanation.
No glass on the floor. So the window was broken from the inside.
Or the glass was cleaned up sometime in the past week. The photograph here shows the light on the top floor was on during the Hathorne House fire. Nancy doesn't investigate this angle, even though there was a cutscene dedicated to this mysterious third-floor light. The missing evidence is a chart, pictures, and testimony. Why can't Tegan make a second copy of this evidence?
Let's just say I can tell when someone is trying to hide something from me.
Unless that someone is Tegan, Deirdre, Alicia, or Olivia. Judge Danforth says the AW key is part of the stolen evidence, which contradicts the evidence list. Nancy keeps the AW key for herself instead of giving it to Judge Danforth.
I unfortunately must file the papers in 2 days.
The deadline is tomorrow at midnight. That's 1 day, not 2.
Do you have CCTV footage from the break-in?
Yes, we do. Huh. I had completely forgotten about those.
Judge Danforth forgets there is video footage of the break-in. Judge Danforth is an idiot. Nancy doesn't look through any of the papers in the Hathorne house. How did the police not notice Olivia's jacket at the crime scene? Olivia's jacket briefly disappears when Nancy looks at it. It's never explained how Olivia's jacket got inside the Hathorne house. Who was trying to frame her, and why? The desk and mirror are both in perfect condition, despite being at the center of a fire. This letter from Francis Tuttle says the will is in the house. Nancy doesn't bother to look for it. Nancy doesn't show this evidence to Lauren or Judge Danforth. Nancy only explores this part of the house. Why doesn't she explore the rest of the house? Why does Jason hang out near angry protesters all day long?
I thought you should know there's a car parked outside in the handicapped spot.
Huh, you don't say. I'll have it taken care of.
Judge Danforth says he'll have Jason's car removed from the handicapped spot, but he doesn't.
You need to come here, quickly.
Tegan says to come here without clarifying where here is. Multiple times in this game, Nancy's inventory flashes on screen and instantly disappears at the start of a cutscene. It's so dark, the graffiti is barely visible. The shadows on the plants change when Nancy hangs up. Why doesn't Nancy answer the phone call? Yeah, she's busy right now, but she answered Deirdre's phone call when she was busy at the start of the game.
So I didn't tell you everything.
This is followed by a half confession, which doesn't reveal everything. We never learned who graffitied the Perry house, or why. That's a pretty big thing for everyone to overlook. Tegan is far more upset about her AW work than about her sister going to jail. Tegan is a jerk. Where is May tonight? When Nancy calls Frank, she's standing here. When he picks up, suddenly she's standing here. Nancy's inventory flashes on screen, even though we're playing as Frank now. Joe really needs to go to the bathroom. What were the Hardys doing all day if they're just now searching for ghosts? Homemade is one word, not two. Joe made a book just for one page of notes. This puzzle. Joe's notes for this puzzle aren't helpful. Frank's phone is useless.
I just finished setting everything up.
Joe claims he set things up, but absolutely nothing is set up. Olivia leaves her fog machine running, even when she's not using it. We see all the things Olivia uses to fake ghost hauntings, but we never get to see one of the ghost hauntings. That would have been cool.
A brochure all about Abigail Hathorne Woodley's life.
We don't get to read this.
I don't see Abigail Hathorne Woodley's grave on here, though.
Are you blind, Frank? Abigail's grave is marked with an X. Olivia hides things in a public location. This box is wider than the plant covering it. How was it not visible? What is the other thing in the box with the decoder? I want to see it. If you pause at the right moment, you see two decoders on screen at the same time. This puzzle desperately needs instructions. The game got rid of the hint button that was in previous games. The strange note is added to Frank's inventory, but players never get a chance to look at it in the inventory, since the rest of the Frank segment is all cutscenes.
Oh, this is just a list of chores.
Joe should have realized it was a chore list halfway through the puzzle. A white square flashes in the lower left corner of the screen.
It's dated tonight.
There was no date on the note. Why does Olivia hide her chore list in code in a cemetery? Olivia just happens to show up after the Hardys decode her note. The leaves at the base of the tree change.
Hathorne Woodley's grave.
What are you talking about? It's not here.
The Hardys confront their main suspect. Instead of showing what happens next, the game abruptly jumps ahead a few minutes to when everyone is drinking tea together. The Hardy Boys are stupid enough to accept a poisoned drink from their main suspect. What did the Hardys and Olivia talk about during the few minutes that the game skipped over? Did they just stand around and drink in silence? Where did the tea and teacups come from? Olivia clearly isn't holding any tea here.
Abigail Hathorne Woodley's ghost.
The word Woodley isn't in the text box.
Take the keys for my car. It's way too far of a walk all the way there.
The cemetery is not within walking distance of the house. Therefore, the Hardys and Olivia drove here, so why are they all out of breath?
Are you serious?
At first, Nancy doesn't believe they saw a ghost, even though Nancy saw the ghost herself.
I've never seen anything like it, and her eyes. To be fair, I couldn't see her eyes.
Joe first describes the ghost by talking about her eyes, but later claims he didn't see her eyes.
That wasn't a woman.
To be fair, I couldn't see her eyes.
Why does Joe need to see a ghost's eyes in order to tell if they're male or female?
Woman, and I couldn't see her eyes.
Nancy claims she couldn't see the ghost's eyes, even though they were clearly visible. Olivia's hand goes through Joe's arm. Joe keeps staring at the floor.
No one gets scared or hurt in a museum.
Henrik Vanderheun would beg to differ.
Remember, we're here for May.
Olivia isn't here for May. She's here because she happened to be wandering in the cemetery at the same time as the Hardys.
Did you happen to see the red spray paint on our house on the way in? Well, she did.
Yeah, but the spray paint wasn't about May. It was about Tegan and the AW.
Did you track down any new leads for the arsonist? Okay, I'll go first.
Nancy doesn't give anyone a chance to answer her question. Why does Nancy ask the Hardys if they have leads on the arsonist? She knows they were investigating the ghost, not the arson.
Someone is lying about their alibi.
It takes Nancy far too long to realize the culprit would lie about their alibi. That should have been obvious from the start.
Olivia, you can stay here tonight, if you want. The couch, unfortunately, all the other beds are taken.
Where are the Hardy boys staying tonight? Olivia's jacket and business card disappear from Nancy's inventory without any explanation. It's raining outside one window, but not the other. Nancy's friends are blurry here. Nancy is standing here, and when the cutscene starts, she's standing here.
I'd like to just eat my breakfast with...
Deirdre doesn't eat breakfast.
I've already answered a litany of questions from these two. You want to ask them. I'm sure they'd love to tell you.
This doesn't happen, and so we never learn where Deirdre was on the second night.
My hands feel like pins and needles.
Nancy drank ergot 2 days ago. Why is she just now feeling the after effects? The camera readjusts itself in the middle of the conversation.
It was a man with black eyes.
Except she claims to have seen Judge John Hathorne.
Olivia said she saw a man. She didn't say which man.
Mass psychogenic illness by more than one person. Hallucinations, vasoconstriction in the hands and feet.
How does Deirdre know all the side effects of ergot poisoning? 4 times, the game hyphenates numbers that don't need hyphens. The Hardys don't immediately suspect they were poisoned through the tea they drank right before the hallucination started.
None of this helps May.
Deirdre rightfully points out that they are doing nothing to help May. They ignore Deirdre and continue to focus on things that don't help May.
We need a perp.
A perp?
The Hardys act like they've never heard the word perp before.
We should still try to find it.
Nancy says they should try to find the will, but she doesn't do this. You should try taking your own advice, Nancy. The camera readjusts itself for no reason. Where is May on the 3rd day of the game?
Because she's going to be arrested for these crimes by the end of the day.
Nancy says this to Jason before Judge Danforth tells her when the arrest will be. Nancy says May will be arrested for crimes, as in more than one. What's the other crime besides arson? Where are the protesters on the 3rd day of the game? They should still be here because the case they're protesting hasn't been decided yet.
What? They're skipping?
You can hear protesters shouting in the background of this scene, even though they're not there.
You really think this was intentional?
If you look at all the evidence, yes. Olivia's jacket at the crime scene.
That does not prove the ergot poisoning was intentional.
Spray painting of the Perry house.
That does not prove the ergot poisoning was intentional.
Everyone's obsession to get May convicted.
That also does not prove the ergot poisoning was intentional.
Everyone's obsession to get May convicted.
Who is everyone? Judge Danforth is the only character who wants May to be arrested.
Spray painting of the Perry house. Everyone's obsession to get May convicted.
You know what all these people have in common.
Nancy wasn't talking about people. The ink on the paper changes from dark to light. Ink doesn't work like that. The terms of this offer state that Alicia Cole is the owner of the Hathorne house. No one notices this huge red flag that Alicia is the culprit.
The requested section of the Salem Waterworks.
What Nancy says doesn't match with what's written on the map. Salem Waterworks prints their maps on tracing paper so Nancy can have a puzzle to solve. This map doesn't match the cutscene at the start of the game, where the Hathorne house is visible from Deirdre's car. The map has a courthouse lane. Why isn't the courthouse on Courthouse Lane?
Digging in a cemetery looks very suspicious.
Joe digs without a shovel. This glitch. The Hardy Boys' butts. Nancy learns how Olivia and the Hardys were poisoned, but she doesn't bother to tell them about it. Deirdre, could you please look at Lauren when you're talking to her?
Alicia has been poisoning you, Lauren.
Nancy discovers Alicia is trying to kill Lauren. This should have been the end of the mystery. Instead, Nancy keeps the attempted murder a secret. Alicia is still working as Lauren's lawyer at the end of the game. Why didn't Lauren fire her?
We think we were poisoned by ergot. What did you eat yesterday?
Eat? Why?
Because you were poisoned. Nancy just said that. Nobody comments on the fact that Olivia skipped dinner yesterday. Olivia is super rude to invite herself over to Lauren's house, then take 3 cups of tea back home with her.
I just realized I never followed up with you two about what you were doing on the day the AW evidence was stolen.
Nancy did ask Alicia and Judge Danforth what they were doing that day. Why did she forget?
How about the night that the Hathorne house was burned? You were here.
I was out of town.
Nancy forgets she asked Olivia about her alibi on the first day of the game. You know, the alibi challenge is bad enough without having to repeat some of them.
The process of handing over Hathorne House to the state so it can be turned into a museum.
Nancy has seen the demolition offer for Hathorne House. She could easily prove Alicia is lying about the museum, but she doesn't. We can't talk to Lauren about Alicia's plans for Hathorne House. What is going on with Deirdre's head?
From what I've heard, an arrest will happen later today.
Why did the police tell Judge Danforth about their plans to arrest May? He didn't need to know that. Nancy can't talk to Tegan or May about May's upcoming arrest.
Nancy, I'll call you later.
I said I'd call him back and I didn't.
Actually, Ned is the one who said he'd call back.
But May isn't involved, at least from what I can see, in the question of ownership of the house.
Which is why Nancy shouldn't have wasted half the game focusing on the house's ownership. It is unnatural how Deirdre looks at Nancy every time she talks.
She has a reputation for being weird and a loner.
May has a reputation for being a loner? No. She is a loner who refuses to talk to people. You already know this, Nancy. There should not be a comma after the word whole.
Jason Danforth wasn't with Alicia Cole the day the AW evidence was stolen.
Nancy learns Jason's alibi is wrong. Nancy can't talk to Jason about it. The courthouse has cameras in the bathroom. That is creepy and wrong.
It's a shame we can't make out the perp's face.
It is not too blurry. That is clearly Jason Danforth.
Perp?
Deirdre used the word perp earlier today. Why is Nancy acting like she hasn't heard it before?
Isn't that what you call them?
Suspect, Deirdre.
In this particular case, they are talking about a perp. They're literally looking at footage of Jason committing a crime. Why do the CCTV cameras take pictures? Shouldn't they take video? I would like to learn more about the other crimes May committed. When did they happen? What were the circumstances? The newspaper incorrectly puts the $sign after the price, not before. Most newspapers have actual dates, not just Friday morning. The newspaper wasn't here during breakfast. When was it delivered?
I came home for lunch from the museum and she was gone.
It's lunchtime now, but when Jason and Nancy arrive downtown in a few minutes, it's nighttime. Did their car ride take several hours?
May never gave an alibi because she was protecting someone. Do you have any idea who that might be?
Nancy should have asked this question a long time ago. Jason Danforth is such a loser, I have a hard time believing May likes him so much she's willing to go to jail rather than expose the fact that she met with him on the night of the fire.
Before she disappeared, I admit I read through her phone.
Tegan stole her sister's phone and went through it while her sister was still here. Tegan is a jerk. Tegan knew that May was planning to leave long before she disappeared. Why didn't Tegan try to stop her? May doesn't protect her phone with a passcode.
Before she disappeared, I admit I read through her phone. She left it in the living room, and why would she do that?
Because this was before she disappeared. What's so wrong with leaving your phone in a different room?
Juvenile record.
Nancy is surprised to see this, even if you looked at the newspaper earlier.
Jason said he was in trouble for something, but he never said what.
Jason's text messages say nothing of the sort.
Because I was the one who set Hathorne House on fire.
Tegan should have said this a long time ago.
Everywhere, and I couldn't find it.
The text box leaves out the word "and."
Apart, and I was in the storage room, and
the text box leaves out the word "and" again. I understand you're giving a dramatic confession, Tegan, but don't destroy the text box.
And I was in the storage room, and
What storage room? Where is the storage room in Hathorne House?
Knocked over the candle I was using.
Why was Tegan using a candle?
I don't know what I was thinking bringing you into this.
Tegan called in detectives to solve a crime that she committed. Culprit foils their own plot. Deirdre should be visible in this shot. Why does Nancy take a moment to stare at the corner? When did the Hardys arrive? Nancy has been looking out the window for the past several minutes and no cars drove by.
Our first arrest.
I'm with Joe on this one. He should try to arrest Tegan. The fact that the Hardys don't try to arrest her is a letdown.
I need you and Joe to just stay with her, and make sure she doesn't go anywhere.
This makes 2 days in a row where someone has to stay at the house and babysit Tegan because she's upset. Can't they trust Tegan to stay at home alone without causing trouble? Everyone's hair is in perfect condition, even though they were out in the middle of a bad storm.
If we split up, we have a better chance of finding her.
How does Deirdre expect Nancy to find May if she's trapped here without a car? A white square flashes in the lower left corner of the screen.
I called you because I needed you to connect with May, the one thing I wanted from you. You couldn't deliver.
If all Deirdre cared about was getting May's alibi, she should have said this during the many conversations they had about investigating other things.
I read through her phone. She left it in the living room.
What's this? May forgot her phone.
Nancy acts like Tegan didn't tell her this information already. May writes the Hathorne house is barely standing, which is wrong. May wants to hang out at the burned Hathorne house, even though she knows the police want to arrest her for arson. That's a dumb move on May's part. These texts are from the same day Jason flew back to the United States, yet it sounds like he was already back home when he wrote these. Nancy's task list says to search Jason's car. Why does she suddenly know there's evidence inside there? Half the street is covered in shadow, and the other half is clear. Jason is standing outside his car, even though there's a terrible storm right now. One of the cars in the background is driven by a floating head. Jason drives past the same 3 cars multiple times. The screen is black for over 10 seconds before the loading screen appears. Why wasn't the loading screen there the entire time? I thought the game crashed on me. Why did Jason take Nancy downtown? She didn't ask him to do that.
Get up. I have to go.
Where does he have to go? Jason tells Nancy to leave his car. He doesn't react when she stays inside. Where does this plane ticket come from? There's clearly no ticket on the dashboard, but when you click on it, Nancy picks up a ticket. Jason flew to Austria on the 26th and flew back on the 28th. What did he do on the 27th? Why did Jason keep this ticket? There's no reason for him to hold on to this incriminating evidence. This blurry poster. Again, most of Nancy's inventory disappears without an explanation. Does she dump all her unwanted items in Jason's car, or what? How does Nancy know about Jason's financial situation? And what is his financial situation? All we get told is that he's in debt. We don't know how much he owes or who he owes money to.
Yeah, I stole it from my dad's office.
I said this earlier, but I'll repeat it. The evidence room was robbed, not the judge's office. There was a puzzle about the evidence room being robbed. How did Nancy forget that?
Does Alicia have the book now?
Actually, no.
Jason gave the AW evidence to Alicia. Why didn't he give her the Book of Apologies too? We never find out what happened to the stolen AW evidence.
Where is it?
It's somewhere safe. I need it to...
Jason says he needs the Book of Apologies. Why? Nancy interrupts before he says what he needs it for.
Am I supposed to believe Alicia is behind this?
Nancy already knows Alicia tried to murder Lauren. Why is Nancy so skeptical of the idea of Alicia being a blackmailer?
You haven't mentioned May once.
Because you asked him a bunch of questions about Alicia in the Book of Apologies. If you wanted to talk to him about May, you should have asked Jason about May.
What do we do about Tegan?
This is more important. She's not going anywhere.
The Hardy Boys stopped babysitting Tegan once the plot needs them. I guess babysitting Tegan wasn't important. It was just an excuse to get them out of the way for a while.
Jason said there was some way to open the tunnels with the statue. But he didn't really say how.
Thanks for nothing, Jason.
I need a source of light.
Nancy and the Hardys forget they have cell phones. Nancy and the Hardys ignore the fact that there are multiple candles here. Those are light sources.
You didn't bring any flashlights?
No one told him to. Why is Olivia at the museum when everywhere else in town is closed? She can't possibly have any customers.
Hey, Olivia! Can I borrow one of these lamps?
There is only one lamp. Nancy discovers a hidden passageway cliché. The graphics are so poor, you can barely see the secret tunnel. In the game's trailer, opening the secret tunnel was awesome! Why did they change the scene? The Hardys can't possibly see the secret tunnel because they are facing the wrong direction.
Hey, I'm at the entrance to the tunnels.
Deirdre doesn't know about the tunnels, Nancy. She left before Jason told you about them. Why don't they let Deirdre come with them to explore the tunnels? She's at Hathorne House right now. It's not that far away. Deirdre babysat May 10 years ago, when May was 9. How old is Deirdre relative to May? If Deirdre is 18, like Nancy, that means 8-year-old Deirdre was babysitting 9-year-old May.
I didn't come home last night because I couldn't stand being in the same room as her, and...
Deirdre couldn't handle sleeping in the same room as May on the second night of the game. Why wasn't this an issue for her on the first night? Nancy and the Hardys wait until they're in the dark passageway before turning on their phone lights. The puzzle distribution in this game is uneven. The first 80% of the game has basically no puzzles, and the last 20% throws a bunch of puzzles at you back to back to back. They should have spread out the puzzles instead of saving them all for the end. These directions are from May's phone, but they aren't labeled. How does Nancy know they're directions for the hidden tunnels? They could easily be directions for something else. How did May navigate the tunnels without her directions? May's directions are north, south, west, east, and D. What is D?
Wait, our cell phones don't work down here.
Hi, you've reached the phone of...
Nancy's phone works down here.
We'll follow the signs.
How do the Hardys know they have to follow the AW signs in order to reach Deirdre? There's nothing to indicate the signs lead them in the correct direction. Why does Frank still have Joe's ghost hunting notebook? He should have thrown it out long ago. Joe is the one who takes Francis Tuttle's note, so why is it in Frank's inventory? The entire icosahedron fits into the lock. How thick is that door?
Grab her! Grab her!
They grab the bookcase, not Deirdre. Deirdre doesn't look at the Hardys when they enter.
Doesn't anyone answer their phone anymore?
Well, I could have died if you hadn't saved me. I would have been trapped down here for days and starved to death.
If Deirdre has her phone, I doubt she would be trapped for days.
That was a secret entrance.
Where is this secret entrance?
I came here to try and find the will.
Deirdre said she was leaving to find May. Why did she stop that and start searching for the will instead? Who lit all the candles in this room? This is a secret room that no one knows about. What is that thing on the right? Who built this puzzle? Was it Francis, or is this from Judge Hathorne's time? Because this is a pretty complicated machine to create. The clues for this puzzle do not explain the exact dates for Imbolic or Samhain, forcing the player to guess. The screen goes black when the house appears in order to save on animation.
Whoa!
Oh!
Something moved. This is so exciting.
The Hardy Boys are getting way too excited about playing with a dollhouse. May is lying unconscious on the floor with a hurt leg. It is never explained how either injury occurred. This secret underground room that no one knows about has working electricity.
Wait, not yet. Jason told me he brought a book down here. It's a very important book that I need to find.
May was there when Nancy told the Hardys about the Book of Apologies, but Nancy acts like May doesn't know what it is. May got accepted into Waverly Academy, so she's still in high school. Why doesn't she ever go to school during the day? May is accepted into the fall term. This game takes place in October. When does fall term start?
This is it. The Book of Apologies.
Nancy never gets to read the Book of Apologies. There is a brief shot of Alicia spying on our heroes. What was the point of that? Alicia will later claim she spent the entire night with Judge Danforth, and he doesn't contradict her. How did she leave the room without him noticing?
Every turn we've been lied to, and I am sick of being lied to.
And yet this did not stop Deirdre from lying to Nancy about May's past. At the end of this scene, the screen fades to black, then shows this picture for a frame. The Hardys and Deirdre talk for a minute. That's not enough time for Alicia to break into the hidden tunnels, set off the water, and beat our heroes back to the courthouse. A white square flashes in the lower left corner of the screen. The text box has the word little, which Alicia doesn't say. Nancy and May don't acknowledge Alicia's voice. May stands in place and does nothing while the water level goes up. May's lips aren't synced with her dialogue.
Drowning!
May says drowning to indicate she's drowning. Nancy is underwater. She shouldn't be able to hear May. Who is the other person the ghost is with? This area never floods. May is behind Nancy. How did she get into the room before her?
I can't see a thing.
The text box leaves out Nancy's second eye. Why can't Nancy use her phone as a light like she's been doing? Nancy can see all of May here. When the conversation starts, May is half off screen.
Nancy Drew smokes?
Only when I'm on fire.
That is a terribly rude joke to make to a burn victim.
You have this amazing, maybe even photographic memory.
May has a photographic memory. Why didn't this come up earlier? If you use the lighter on the lantern 3 times, it disappears and you're stuck here forever.
Not as elegant as my lockpicks, but just as handy.
Oh, so Nancy has a lockpick. Where was it earlier when she had to open Judge Danforth's door?
It's dusty. It's dusty. It's covered in a thick layer of dust. Should wipe it clean first.
Why is this the only dusty thing in the game that Nancy cleans? It's a good thing Jason accidentally dropped the AW key in Austria, otherwise Nancy and May would have been trapped here forever. The first frame of this scene is inside the judge's office. Why? Where is Nancy? She looks like she's outside, but when she breaks in through the door, she's in the hallway leading to the bathrooms. If you use slow motion, you see the door doesn't open. Nancy teleports through it.
You just entered my room through the wall. I want an explanation.
We found the
will. No need to recap.
How does Nancy know they found the will? Nancy says there's no need to recap, but the very next scene is 10 minutes recapping Alicia's crimes. We already know who the culprit is. We've known who the culprit is for an hour. We don't need a 10-minute recap here. The endgame culprit challenge is tell the judge why the culprit is guilty. Exciting! A white square flashes in the lower left corner of the screen.
Can you, Frank, and Joe wait in the hallway?
Deirdre and the Hardys promise to stay outside the room. The next time we see them, they're inside the room. Way to follow directions, guys!
Run along, everyone, before your PB&Js get cold.
Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches are traditionally served cold.
And that woman wasn't her mother. Give me a break.
Alicia thinks Lauren shouldn't mourn the person she lived with for 13 years just because they're not biologically related. Alicia is a jerk.
I'm not answering these questions.
Alicia says she won't answer any questions 1 minute. The next minute, she answers everyone's questions.
And muddy shoes.
Alicia's shoes aren't visible unless you move the camera.
Look here, on the wall. An access code.
The access code isn't visible unless you move the camera. Could they please stop talking about things that aren't on screen?
Alicia was responsible for stealing AW evidence from your office. Then Jason broke into the evidence room and...
In this conversation, Nancy says the AW evidence was stolen from the evidence room and Judge Danforth's office. Stop being inconsistent, Nancy!
And how did he have access to the evidence room? Only you and the judge had the code. Do you happen to have the code for the evidence room door?
Nope, sorry. He hasn't given that to me yet.
Wrong. If you ask Alicia for the access code earlier, she says she doesn't have it.
Well, after the burglary, we realized that this place was in dire need of higher security. I ordered the keypad online.
The timeline doesn't fit. They added the keypad to the evidence room after the robbery, not before.
I found plane tickets in Jason's car.
You found one plane ticket.
To be honest with you, I know he's always looking for money.
Doesn't everyone like to get money, though?
How did he buy a first-class round-trip ticket to Salzburg?
Technically, it was a ticket to Vienna, not Salzburg.
How large is this purchase?
Thousands of dollars, Judge.
That's an expensive plane ticket. How was Nancy able to afford the trip?
Miss Cole.
Why does the judge nod and move his arms before talking? Alicia invades Judge Danforth's personal space. There should not be a comma here. There should not be a comma here.
So I can run my luminous vegan tea grocery store.
Since when does Lauren's tea shop sell groceries?
I live here. I work here. I am a member of this community.
This lip sync is terribly done.
I work here.
Working in a town doesn't give you the right to murder another citizen.
I am a member of this community. This town needs me.
This town needs me doesn't appear in the text box. Alicia suddenly turns to the side. Alicia spends the next 4 minutes standing around doing nothing. The option Tegan Perry is responsible for the fire is the one you pick if you do not want to accuse her. That is not intuitive.
Tegan Perry is responsible for the fire, but it was an accident.
Why are we taking Tegan's word for this? She's lied about the incident multiple times already. Nancy can get Tegan arrested for the Hathorne house fire, even though there is no evidence Tegan did it deliberately. No one cares Nancy gets someone arrested without evidence.
And while I wish I could give out punishment for withholding information,
Why can't you? Impeding a criminal investigation is a crime. Ugh should be capitalized since it's the first word of the sentence.
This has been a very tough time for everyone. I think the damage has been done.
Agreed. But...
Judge, did you ever interview May?
Nancy abruptly changes the topic so she can yell at Judge Danforth. That's uncharacteristically mean of her. Nancy and the judge talk about May like she's not standing in the room right now. For the entire game, Judge Danforth has been portrayed as ridiculously incompetent, but now the game treats him like he's a legitimate villain.
He is friends with her, Judge.
What? How's that possible? I thought at least I would know. I doubt that. He barely spends any time with me.
Judge Danforth isn't part of Jason's life, but he expects to know all the details of Jason's life.
I just hope you remember that when you sentence Jason.
Nancy should know Judge Danforth can't be the judge in Jason's trial. That would be a conflict of interest.
You saved my life.
Why does May give Jason all the credit for saving her life? Nancy should get most of the credit. The people talking in the background are clearly not the people here at the party. Stop swinging your arms around, Tegan.
I kind of feel like a jerk for not talking to you when you first came here.
Only kind of?
I'm gonna have to think about it.
The Hardy Boys are great detectives, but they can't tell Nancy isn't interested in their business plan. Why can't we hear Ned talk during this scene? We can hear him talk the other times he's on the phone with Nancy. The same house appears 4 times on this street. There is no preview of the next game in the series. This trivia question is low effort. At least give us a sound effect for getting the answer right.